Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 344. I am so excited for our interview today. We have with us Mandy Flanders. She's a holistic health coach and a certified natural health professional. She's working towards her traditional naturopathic certification through Trinity College, and she has a wealth of information to share with us today. Most importantly, though, her story, which is incredibly inspirational. As you listen to Mandy's story today, if it really resonates with you in a way that makes you want to do the work that she does and help people as a holistic health coach, then I definitely think you will love IIN, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. That's the online school that I went to take my health coach training. It's a year-long health coach training program designed for very busy people so you can fit it into your schedule. It is a phenomenal course. Every week you're given videos that are of the caliber like TED Talks. They're very interesting. I know in school a lot of the classes were boring and I was afraid that this would be boring. Every single week was incredible. It was riveting. If you are into health, you will absolutely love IIN's program. They train you how to be a successful health coach. So if you're interested in becoming a holistic health coach, call up IIN, talk to them, ask them for more details, talk to them about their health coach training program. Make sure you mention the Learn True Health podcast and Ashley James because I secured a fantastic discount for my listeners. You can also get free access to part of their training by going to learntruehealth.com/coach. That's learntruehealth.com/coach. So sign up to check out a module of their training so you can get a feel for it. Excellent. Well, enjoy today's interview. Mandy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, Mandy, you've been a listener for quite a while. You're very active in the Learn True Health Facebook group. You and I have been friends on Facebook. I love following all your posts, by the way. They have inspired and helped me. And I know that you're going to help a lot of our listeners here today. So after listening to this interview, everyone can go to the Facebook group and we can have an awesome discussion with Mandy about everything that we've learned here today. I really want to dive in and hear more about your story because you have this beautiful journey that you've been on towards the healer that you are now. And of course, you had to go through your own healing in order to be inspired to want to dedicate your life to helping others. So thank you for, getting a bit vulnerable today and sharing what you've been through in your past, because I know a lot of us can relate. So tell us your story.
Thank you. I started to get into holistic health after I got pregnant, actually. I was very acutely aware of how everything that I was ingesting, feeling, thinking was going right to my baby. And at the time, I didn't know what to eat, what to avoid. I was very into water sports at the time that I got pregnant that are pretty hard on pregnancy, and you actually are not supposed to do them while you're pregnant. And I was also coming out of drug addiction at the time that I found out I was pregnant. So I was entering into a very new territory of just a complete metamorphosis into this new person that I didn't know existed. And so I started learning about the types of foods that pregnant women should eat and started learning about, I didn't really even know how to cook at the time. I thought macaroni and cheese was cooking or a can of soup was cooking. And so I learned a lot my son is now 6 and I learned a lot since that time.
So when you were pregnant, you were no longer using drugs and alcohol, but can you tell us a bit about that experience? How did you end your addiction to drugs and alcohol?
This story is interesting, I think. I got arrested for my third DUI and wound up in a jail that was like an hour away from my home. And I was in my early 20s and just terrified of calling my parents to let them know that I had been arrested again for drinking and driving.
How old were you?
I was, I think, 21.
Mm-hmm.
So it was about 10, 12, 10 or 11 years ago. It took me a few days of being in jail to finally decide to call and let anyone know that I was in there. But I knew at that time that something had to change. I didn't know how it was going to change and I didn't know what it would look like, but I knew that I could not go on that way. I knew I was looking around the jail cell at all of these other women that were in there with me, and I just knew that I did not belong there. It was not a path that I saw myself on for the next 10, 20, 30 years. You know what I mean? And so I detoxed in jail. I remember feeling extremely sick and shaking and sweating and nauseous. And um, of course, the food that they give you in jail is not nourishing or sustaining at all. And so I finally called my family, and I remember my mom answering the phone. It was a collect call, and I just started crying, and I was like, I don't know why I keep doing this. And she didn't really know what to say either. So they finally came and bailed me out, and I went back to my apartment, and I lost my license because it was my third DUI. Um, and I started going to AA about a month later. It took me a while to decide what I was going to do and how I would do it. And I had an anklet on at the time to detect alcohol in my sweat levels.
Wow.
Yeah, so I started going to AA, and
They should have that same kind of anklet for like donuts. I don't know. Like
I know.
we've
I
detected your
know.
blood sugar is raised, like zap. No more Krispy Kreme for you.
That's hilarious. I know. Why don't they do that? Your sugar content is way too high.
Right? And go eat some kale.
That's funny. So, yeah, I started going to AA and was surrounded by a lot of people my age who were going through similar things. And it was from
Mm.
there that I was able to find like a steady footing to figure out how to get sober. I actually ended up linking up with an old friend of mine, and who I used to party with, who found herself in AA. And it was kind of um, ironic that we were both there together. So it was good to have a community of people around me who were trying to figure out how to do this too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just had a lot of good support. It was a really good foundation for me. I'm not currently in AA. And not long after that, I met my husband, who was a huge catalyst for healing and growth for me as well. That relationship that we have together has been like super profound for my healing. So after AA, I started yoga teacher training. For me, and this is not the path that I would recommend for everybody, but for me, yoga teacher training gave me a new set of tools to be able to manage the stresses that the emotions and the stresses that I was trying to numb out with alcohol and drugs.
Mm-hmm. Did you get to figure out what led you to using drugs and alcohol in your life? Or did you find that after you stopped using drugs and alcohol that you started using other things to cope? Like a lot of people will go to sugar to stimulate the serotonin and kind of get an escape. Some people will, there's sex addiction, there's addiction to watching TV, there's exercise addiction. So there's all ways that we can legally sort of escape. Did you find that you were craving different habits that were unhealthy, or did you really get to the root cause?
I did not get to the root cause initially. I did a lot of counseling and a lot of deep inner work. And it really wasn't until we were exposed to toxic mold like 3 years ago
Hmm.
that I realized that there was a deeper root. And it's interesting because these stories are from two totally different times in my life, but they overlap so much. So the toxic mold helped me to realize that I actually did not get to the root of the issues at all. And I didn't realize it, of course, at the time. And I was medicating with chocolate. I was medicating with research. I was medicating with certifications and schooling and education. And so a lot of people would consider those healthy, but I was still stuck in this disease of avoidance with
Mm.
not the best coping mechanisms. And so I would feel stressed and then I would start researching, oh man, my son has a runny nose. So I'm going to start researching all the causes ever that could contribute to a runny nose. So that wasn't really helpful either. So then we were exposed to toxic mold. We had lived in this house for like 3 or 4 years, and we had some really intense family stuff going on. My younger sister had just been diagnosed with brain cancer,
Oh.
and some other things were going on. And my body was just under an extreme amount of stress. I was not sleeping well. My food choices were not the best. And I could tell my heart rate was high all the time. I was just not managing my stress very well. So then I fell sick from the toxic mold, and the kids did too. And we were getting sick with colds and congestions like every other week. And then I was having these crazy symptoms of headaches and severe brain fog, nausea, digestive issues, heart palpitations, joint pain, muscle pain, just so many symptoms that a person should not have to be subjected to. And so after I went on a hunch. I didn't even know that we were being exposed to toxic mold, but I just went on a hunch. Something told me to get the house tested. So we did and found very high levels of a lot of different types of molds. And there's 5 really, really toxic black molds, and we had 4 of
Oh
them
my
in our home.
gosh. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. How long
I
had it been
know.
going on for? Was it chronic, or did all that mold just suddenly happen, or did you realize you had been exposed to it for a long time?
I think we had been exposed to it for a long time. And with this extreme stress that we were under,
Mm.
it triggered, it's like a kind of an opportunistic pathogen. So it was like, oh, hey, you're kind of weak right now. So we're going to attack you. And that's what
Yeah.
happened.
It's like that rain barrel effect keeps coming up. Oh my gosh, that must have been crazy. So tell me a bit about the intuition. What, like, was it a little voice? Can you remember back to that moment that you thought this could be mold? Like, what notified you that it could be black mold?
It was just a very strong gut feeling.
So you listened. You listened to the
Yeah.
gut.
Yeah. And it was really challenging because I didn't realize what a huge undertaking mold was going to be for my family and for our health and for our bank account.
Mhm. How did you get rid of it?
We had, oh man, that's a whole other story. We hired a remediation company, and I didn't know really much about mold at the time. So we hired this remediation company after we had it tested, and they found high levels of the Stachybotrys, Aspergillus penicillin, Cladosporium, Chaetomonium. So this remediation company came in and they just taped up the door and did a zipper, and they were tracking the materials like in and out through the house still. And then they were removing the walls, they removed the bathtub, the sinks, part of the ceiling, and they just kept removing until they didn't see any more mold. But they were spraying what they said were natural mold killers, but I could
Mm.
smell it through the whole air duct system. Like I could smell it. We were sitting on the couch, me and the kids, and I could smell this chemical coming through the air vents. And I was like, well, that's interesting because they supposedly taped over the air vent in the bathroom. So I wonder how I'm smelling it over here coming through the air vent. So they left, and pretty much immediately our health got even worse. And I called the insurance company and was trying to talk to them about the claim and what was going on with our health and how we were not doing very well. And I felt like we were getting worse after the remediation. And she was like, I can't believe you're still in the house. And I said, what do you mean? And she was like, I can't believe nobody has told you to get out of that house. You should not be in the house while they're remediating, especially not with children.
Oh my gosh.
And so I looked at my husband after he got home and I was like, we have to get out of this house. We can't stay here. So we went to stay with my parents for it ended up being like 7 or 8 months while they remediated. So I fired that company, but I came in one time while they were gone and went into the bathroom, and where the wall was, when the air kicked on, I realized that where the wall was removed, there was air moving through that space. So I had someone, a contractor, come in to look at it with me because I was like, I don't understand this. There's air moving through this space. What is this? And he said, oh, that's an air return. And it goes into the whole air duct system. I was like, are you
From
serious?
from the moldy bathroom.
Yes,
Oh my gosh, who designed this?
I know. So I fired that company. I called them and was like, there's mold. This is insulation. There's mold all over this. And this is an air return. So everything that you were doing was getting sucked into our entire air duct system. And they denied it. They were like, oh, that's not mold. So I had a company come and test it. And sure enough, it tested positive for very high counts of all the black molds. And so I fired them, hired another company to come in, and they did it right. So they taped up everything, they sealed everything, they had negative air flow going out of the house so that the mold would be tracked outside the house. They were wearing, the hazmat suits, like everything was done properly the second time around.
Can you share the name of that company? Is it a national company or just local?
I think it's just local. They're called Dry Rescue Services,
Local to what area?
Orlando, Florida.
Okay. Just put, want to give good attention to good companies.
Yeah.
Oh my
So they did a
gosh.
good job. We ended up having to replace the entire air duct system, the bathroom and the laundry room and the kitchen.
Amazing. 7 months out of your home.
Yeah, with two little kids.
So, what did you do to recover the health of your family after you realized that everyone had been exposed to 4 toxic black molds?
So initially, I really focused on the diet. I cut out all high histamine foods, so we didn't really do anything fermented. I cut out grains for me. I cut out all animal products. And so we were eating pretty much fruits and veggies. And I didn't really feel like it impacted me that much, which I was kind of surprised by because I was like, well, maybe I'm just detoxing or whatever. So then I started doing homeopathic detox by the Energetics brand. And that seemed to help a little bit. I noticed more drainage and things like that. And then it was like months and months later. Oh, and I was doing saunas regularly too. I couldn't work out at all in that time because every time I started to work out, like within 5 or 10 minutes, I would have to go and take a 2 or 3 hour nap after working out because
Oh
my
my
adrenals
gosh.
were just so shot.
Right. Do you think that was an accumulation over the alcohol and like your life before the mold, or do you think that your adrenals were fine until the mold?
I mean, they probably had some accumulation from my life before the mold, but there was so much time in between that I feel like it was mostly stress related and then compounded by the mold.
Yeah.
There was just so much stress happening in that time. It's like really hard to paint the picture of how taxing this was emotionally on us. It strained my marriage. My kids were extremely stressed out. My daughter was like 1.5 at the time, and my son was 3. And it was just a really, really rough time trying to figure out. And I didn't know anything about remediation. I didn't really know anything about mold at the time. So I just kept making these decisions that I thought were the right decisions, like hiring that remediation company that was referred to us. And then it would kind of blow up in my face. And I'm like, why is this happening?
Right, and you're exhausted, you're having to take naps if you exert your body, like, what other kinds of symptoms? And now were you the only one experiencing symptoms, or did your children, your husband also have, health issues because of this?
My kids did too. They were getting sick like every other week, just like I was. And at first we thought, before I figured out it was the mold, at first we thought, well, maybe it's just, um, maybe our immune systems are just weak, because it was in November that we all started to feel sick. And so I was like, well, maybe our immune systems are just weak. It's kind of that time of year. But then it was every other week we were getting sick with a new cold or cough. And our diets were really clean at the time. Everything that we were eating animal products, but everything that we were eating was grass fed, pasture raised, organic. We didn't really do much processed foods. So I felt like we should not have been getting sick that much. And so we were talking to friends and family, and they would just be like, well, maybe you're doing too much, or maybe your immune systems are just not as strong as you thought they were. And I just kind of felt like I was going crazy because I'm like, am I okay? And my husband didn't really have that many symptoms at the time that he noticed. So me and the kids were kind of the canaries. So I just felt a little like I was going crazy.
Okay, so you're doing the homeopathic remedies, you're starting to notice a little bit of help, then what? Did you ever get to a point where you found something that really helped, or was it an accumulation over time of many things that helped you to recover from the mold damage?
So I finally had a friend who was healing from Lyme disease and breast implant illness. And she had suggested doing coffee enemas. And I knew that the liver would be really, really important, because if it gets congested, then nothing else can really work. Digestion shuts down and your brain doesn't think as clearly, and you can have pains and rashes and things like that, which I was having. And so it took me months to finally consider doing the coffee enemas. And after I felt like I had tried everything, I decided to try doing a coffee enema. And after the first one, I had so much more energy.
Mm.
My pain was reduced like pretty dramatically. And I just felt a lot better. I felt clearer headed. I didn't feel anxious. And so I continued to do them. And I did them every day for about a month. And then I started, and I felt really good. I was able to go back to yoga, and because I was doing yoga like once a week, but I had to stop all of it because I couldn't exert my body. So I started to feel really good. And then one day I started to feel like symptomatic again after doing the coffee enemas. And it was just like these waves of anxiety and fear, followed by like heart racing and sweating. And so I thought maybe it was just like a Herx reaction. I thought maybe I was doing too much. I was detoxing, I was demineralizing myself. So for a couple of months, I took a break from the coffee enemas and I started to focus a lot on rebuilding. And I started to feel better. And then I went into, I met with a friend of mine, and I asked her, she's a therapist and she works with kids. So I asked her if she would be willing to work with me, which you're not supposed to do. So I'm not going to say her name. And she agreed. So I
Nice.
started working with her. And we agreed that if things started because we wanted to maintain our friendship, that was the most important thing. So if things got to a place where I needed to go work with a different therapist, we agreed that we would do that and there would not be any issues.
Sure.
So we started working together, and in one of our sessions together, I had the same physical sensations associated with like childhood stuff
Mm.
come up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the same as after the coffee enemas. And I realized in that moment that what my body was trying to do then from the coffee enemas was detox the emotions that were trapped in my body.
Wow.
So I had to learn how to feel comfortable with sensation. And I wasn't, and I didn't realize that until I started doing the coffee enemas. Because anytime I would feel any kind of twinge or anything, I would immediately think that something's wrong with me.
What do you mean by sensation? Being comfortable with sensation? Do you mean being comfortable with like your heart racing or like symptoms the body's demonstrating, or do you mean like emotions?
Emotions. And for me, sometimes they manifest as heart racing, like I'll get like a
Mm-hmm.
wave of anxiety out of nowhere and my heart will be like not racing, but like my heart rate will elevate, or I'll feel like nervous for some reason out of nowhere and start having sweaty armpits or something. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know what that is. But now I have come to understand that when those things happen, it's just energy. Our body is just moving these old stagnant emotions that got stuck in the body out.
For you to process.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to happen consciously. A lot of times we think that we have to be really conscious and aware of these energies moving out of the body, but we don't have to be necessarily. Sometimes that helps. Like if you're working through something, it helps to be conscious. But if you're just sitting watching TV or reading a book and all of a sudden out of nowhere you're super calm and then out of nowhere you have like this sensation of like anxiety or fear or dread, those are the sensations that to me it indicates, oh, okay, there's a trapped emotion or trapped energy or trapped energy in motion, which is emotion, that's trying to move out of my body.
I find that some people like to self-medicate to avoid those feelings that they haven't been able to process. I've caught myself in the past wanting to gain pleasure from food, especially in the evenings. Because in the evenings the kids have gone to bed, the house is quiet, and your mind goes, "Oh, good, you've got some spare time. Let me bring up a memory when you're 5 years old." And you're
Yep.
it's like, here, you're not doing something. Why don't you process this stuff that you
Mm-hmm.
haven't been dealing with? Our unconscious mind likes to bring it up to the surface for us to resolve, because holding on to this stuff is not healthy, and we hold on to it because we weren't able to process it in the moment in our past, or we didn't have the resources to, but we do now. And I would find myself moving towards the fridge even though
Mm-hmm.
I'm not hungry, because I wanted pleasure and distraction from what my mind was presenting. And I was unconscious of it for a long time until I started to really pause and had to get really conscious about it. Am I really hungry? No. Well, why am I having this like very intense desire to get a snack? I don't need one. It's not physically needed for the body to consume calories at 7 p.m. or 9 p.m. or 11 p.m., right? My body
Mm-hmm.
can totally live off of what I ate for dinner. I had enough, and I had enough energy from that food, and it's going to sustain me till the morning. So what's up? And if we look at grocery stores and aisle after aisle of snack food, it's I'm not alone. Many of us
No, not
are
at all.
are snacking our emotions, suppressing our emotions through snacking, pushing
Yep.
them back down. I mean, we grew up in an era where we're not given the resources to acknowledge that emotions are important to work through, and we're not celebrated for taking the time to do that. We're celebrated for the exact opposite. Don't cry, push them down, push through, you know,
Don't be a baby.
get stuff done. Yeah, get it done,
Mm-hmm.
and get up, wipe it off. And so taking the time for self-love and self-care is seen as weakness, and taking the and whereas staying late at work, working on the weekends, pushing through, pulling all-nighters, that is respected. So
Mm-hmm.
beating up your body and harming yourself further is rewarded. So we have this paradox where we maybe came from a family that didn't have any resources to pass on to us about processing our own emotions, and so a lot of us don't believe that emotions are that important when it comes to healing physically. But how important was it for you? I mean, you discovered that some of your physical symptoms were directly related to your unprocessed emotions.
I mean, I would say it was essential to my healing. It wasn't until I started to address that and to learn how to feel safe in my body again, because that's ultimately what it is that we just don't feel safe to process those emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I learned how to do that and how to sit in discomfort, I ultimately remembered that I am safe and that I am okay and that feeling is not a bad thing. And in our society, we're taught everywhere that feeling is not good. If you feel something, you need to get on an antidepressant, you need an anti anxiety. If you feel something, you need an epidural if you're having a baby. So, in all areas of our lives, especially women, we're told that it's not okay to feel.
And in business too.
Oh, yeah.
We have been defeminized. I'm not going to bash men, and that's not the point. The point is that women feel pressured to be the stereotypical man, where,
Yes.
this stereotype that men don't feel, which is just as damaging to men because men have emotions just like women. We are pressured to suppress and to not come from emotion.
And I feel like we're doing the men in our society a huge disservice
Mm-hmm.
by perpetuating that line of thinking.
Exactly. What's on the edge of everyone's mind is how. How did you? How do we process emotions? What are some really healthy practices that can begin to help us to um allow to the surface things that have been creating ill health inside of us?
The first step is having the awareness, because if we don't know that we have something under the surface, then we can't do anything about it. And a lot of people don't even want to recognize that there is something lurking under the surface because we think it's a lot worse than what it really is. I've told my clients before, it's not as bad as you think it is. And I tell them this mental image. I'm like, okay, now imagine you're sitting on the couch and you're looking for the remote, and you go under the couch and you're reaching and you feel something like cold and squishy. So you get a flashlight. You're like, what is that? I can't look. I don't know what that is. So you get your flashlight and you look under the couch and you just realize it's just an old banana. It's not this big, ugly, horrible snake or whatever you were imagining that it was. It's just this little tiny morsel of something that can help you get to the next level of your awareness and of your healing.
I remember the first time I went in for hypnotherapy, I was terrified. I was in my early 20s, and I was really afraid that something dark would become uncovered, that there was something dark inside me, that it was my I was afraid to meet my unconscious mind. And it was really interesting walking in, observing this fear that I was having and
Mm-hmm.
going, that's, I mean, if I was a knee jerk kind of, if I was coming from my reactions, I would have ran away, right? But I was like, just I became the observer. I'm like, oh, that's interesting that there's this part of me that is genuinely afraid of hypnotherapy because I'm afraid of myself. I'm afraid of what's underneath the surface. And that also gave me enough curiosity to want to move forward. And then of course I discovered that there's like this dark evil Ashley hiding inside me, or some like suppressed memories. But it was a lot of stuff that my unconscious mind wanted to resolve, in a way in which I could handle it slowly, layer
Mm-hmm.
after layer. And every time I did, I felt lighter and freer, and my toxic stress would go down further and further. So yeah, it is a process. But
Mm-hmm.
that willingness to listen, absolutely, and know that it isn't that big, giant, scary thing that we think is hiding in our unconscious, but it's just um, a wounded child that really wants to be heard.
Yep. And our subconscious mind has this amazing mechanism. We're geared and designed to survive. So our
Mm-hmm.
subconscious is not going to show us something that we're not prepared to handle. We've never We'll never be shown something that we cannot handle.
Exactly. There's that safety mechanism there, and that's why some people suppress things or push things down. until they're ready, until they're ready
Mm-hmm.
to process them.
If something is coming up, it means that you're ready. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people don't want to admit that because they're like, but I don't know if I am. And I'm like, but you are, because it's starting to come up. So let's
Mm-hmm.
let's explore it and let's see what is really under there. And a lot of times I find that it's never actually the thing that we think it is. We find that it's, like you said, it's that just a little wounded part of us that's like, hey, you haven't paid any attention to me and I haven't felt heard in 30 years. So can we do that now?
That's awesome. So in the last 6 years, so your son is 6, and so it's more like 7 years because it was when you were pregnant that you
Hmm.
started on your health journey. How long have you been sober?
I have been sober. That's a good question. I think about 9 or 10 years.
Awesome. Congratulations. That's really
Thank
cool.
you.
Absolutely. And it's great that you acknowledge that we can use other things to avoid, right? And these because all I think all of us do it. I think all of us to a certain extent will use like TV or the things that are legal just to avoid. Sometimes we just want
Hmm.
to, and some, it's fine. Sometimes we just need an evening to, let's go out to the movies. Let's just forget about the laundry piling up or the emotional laundry piling up.
Hmm.
And it's okay, but there's no judgment here. There's no judgment zone. But is it serving you? And so we just have to look at that. Is this behavior really serving you in the long run? And of course it's not. But
Hmm.
the good thing that came out of your journey and some of your avoidance behavior is you collected a lot of certifications and a lot of wonderful knowledge that has helped you and is helping your clients. So walk us through all the certifications and that you have achieved in the last 9, 10 years.
So I actually went to esthetician school before I did my yoga teacher training. And I'm not currently licensed anymore, but that was like a pretty pivotal step in my holistic health because a lot of the teachers there were energy healers as well as
Mm.
holistic estheticians. So I started to dive into different energy healing modalities. And then from there went into yoga teacher training and then the certified natural health professional. And I do my own, um, I can't call it hypnotherapy, but just kind of like guided questions and guided imagery to help people see their own inner child that wants to be healed.
Mhm. Awesome.
And yeah, and I do like the holistic health coaching. A lot of times, too, I find with my clients when they don't want to address the emotional and mental stuff, I love being able to meet them where they're at with the physical stuff. And I found that sometimes you can't even access the emotional stuff until your body feels strong enough to be able to handle those things that are coming up. So it's
Yes.
important to bring the body up to baseline, nourishing the physical body, and then you can access the deeper things.
Yes, absolutely. That's the exact same thing I found with my clients. And I even tell them right off the bat, some clients like I'll after talking to them for initial talk, I kind of get a feel whether they're ready to deal with the emotional stuff and then do the physical health stuff, or whether they need to like clean up the diet first and have a few months of like feeling good in their own body and then the emotions are going to come to the surface. And I let them
Hmm.
know. And it's so funny because it's right that it's very rare that people are ready to change diet and deal with their or diet, exercise, lifestyle, stress relief, all the physical things
Hmm.
and deal with emotions at the same time. It's usually one or the other, but the
Hmm.
but the first one prepares them for the second one. It's so true. It's funny that you see that as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. You have to, I feel like, bring that body up to a healthy place of being able to handle that stuff because they won't access it otherwise. I've had clients that are like, "Oh yeah," like one client came to me once because she wanted to lose weight. And so we talked about diet and the emotions that go around eating and things like that because you have to address that piece too. And I did not hear from her again after that, after our first appointment. I was like, okay, I respect your process.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I don't really let my clients get away with very much either, which I think for some people can be kind of triggering. Um, because if they want to heal, I want to know how committed they are to the process. One of the first questions I ask somebody before we work together is how dedicated to this process are you and how much do you want to heal? And depending on their answer will determine, if we're a good fit or not, because I can help somebody as much as they want to be helped, and you know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not doing the work for them.
Mm-mm.
But you know what? I love health coaching is so much more hands-on. And of course, I believe that you should have a team of professionals. I have a naturopath, but my naturopath doesn't come home with me. I only see her once every 3 months, So
Mm-hmm.
whereas a health coach, you're talking to weekly or even touching base with daily, depending on, your needs and their service. But some of my clients, I've said, okay, we're texting each other at every meal, or, you just check in and send a picture of your meal. Tell me how you're feeling. Like there's a daily check in. And even though I'm not physically going home with them, the client's doing the work. The client's doing all the work. But we're a way more hand holding than you'll ever get from a doctor, right? So it's a different
Mm-hmm.
relationship. So that the health coach almost goes home with you, but you still have to do the work. And but that accountability sometimes, even just knowing, and I guess with AA it's similar, but just knowing that there's someone you can reach out to
Mm-hmm.
is really allows us to stay present to our goals.
Exactly. It's funny, as you're talking about this, I forgot about one of the certifications. I am also a certified doula and lactation counselor. And health coaching is very similar to doula work because you're guiding somebody into like this kind of birthing process of shedding layers of who they were and to become who they're meant to be. And even if it's just with food, and I shouldn't say just with food because that's a lot of times like a huge mental hurdle for a lot of people to overcome because there are so many layers around it.
And it just keeps going on and on.
I know. I actually had a call with one of my mentors today, and she goes, Mandy, this process doesn't ever end. You know that, right? I was like, I know. I said it's sometimes it's really exciting, and other times it's really discouraging.
Right. It's so beautiful when you can kind of get that big picture of life. The teacher is always the student. I mean, you want a teacher who's always a student because you want someone who's always learning, and you want a coach who has a coach. You want a therapist who has a therapist. We want to make sure that we're not stagnant.
Yes.
Yeah, and now you have a special training around cancer as well. Yoga training for those who are going through cancer.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I teach yoga. I'm certified in yoga for cancer, and I teach yoga in the cancer center here locally.
What's the difference between not non-cancer yoga and cancer yoga?
There's actually a pretty big difference because you have to account for the surgeries that people have had
Mm,
and the treatments that they might be undergoing and the emotions. Cancer is such a deep manifestation that a lot of people who have been diagnosed with cancer, and especially if they're going a more conventional route as far as treatment, have some very deeply rooted patterns emotionally. And so sometimes they could go to like a normal yoga class, but a lot of times, depending on where they're at in their treatment, a yoga for cancer class is going to be a lot more gentle and a lot more all levels.
interesting. When I went through massage therapy college, when this was in the late 90s, the concern was to not stimulate lymph flow that much for cancer patients because we didn't want to metastasize help any of the cancer metastasize, which is just crazy because the second they get off the table and start walking, they're flowing their own lymph. So
I know.
what is massage going to do? So I'm just curious if yoga for cancer patients is different in that you're not stimulating lymph flow, or is it the same?
No, you're definitely stimulating lymph flow. Yoga in itself is like a lymphatic massage. So,
Exactly, exactly. I
and I
just
sometimes do lymphatic massage with my cancer patients too,
mhm,
if they've had like, breast surgeries, or some of them have lymphedema in their legs and their hands. And so we'll do
yeah.
lymphatic massage around those areas to get the lymph moving out.
It's so silly sometimes the myths that survive in the health space.
I know.
Tell me about testimonials. Tell me about some stories of success of people working with you, especially people with cancer. Do you have any stories you can share?
So I have a client actually who came into my class 2 weeks ago, and she's comes to my yoga for cancer class, and she had a lumpectomy on her breast. And so this was a couple years ago. So she comes into my class 2 weeks ago, and she looked like she was about to cry. She looked surprised, scared, worried. And I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And she was like, "I think I have to get an MRI." And I was like, "Really? Why? What happened?" And she was like, "I'm having a lot of pain in my breast." And I said, "You are?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, which one? Is it the same one that you had the lumpectomy, the cancer in?" And she said, "No, it's the other one this time." I said, "Okay, that's, interesting. Let's just take some deep breaths and let's just talk about it." So I started asking her, "What have you been doing? What have you been up to the last couple of weeks since we last saw each other?" She was like, "Well, I just got back from visiting my mom." And I said, "Oh, okay. How did that go?" She was like, "Well, it went good, but I realized we're not as close as I thought we were."
Mm.
And I was like, "Okay. So, tell me a little bit more about that." And so she was like, "I just realized that, things from my childhood," and this woman is in her 60s. She was like, it's just things that I realized from my childhood that weren't what I remembered. And I wasn't very close with my dad because I felt like my relationship with my mom kind of impacted that." And I said, "Okay." So I asked her which side again was the pain, and she said it was on her right side. And the right side is associated with masculine, so dominant male people in our lives. It also has to do with our ability to give. And the cancer that she had was on her left side, so that has to do with dominant females and our ability to receive. So I asked her a little bit more about her relationship with her dad, and she told me. And so I intuitively felt strongly that this pain that she was having had to do with her lack of relationship with her father and guilt that she was feeling because she wasn't giving him love that she felt like she should have been giving him. So I had her lie down on her yoga mat and just asked her to take some deep breaths and to slowly breathe in and out. And I just coached her through a series of questions to help her imagine her dad and to help her imagine her mom. And we went through this little reparenting ritual where she reparented her young self with her dad present in her mind. So after we go through this whole little course of questions and imagery, I asked her to take a deep breath and let it go, and for her to open her eyes. And she sat up and looked at me wide-eyed and was like, "That was incredible." And I said, "Good." So I said, "Okay, how does your breast pain feel now?" And she was like, "It's gone. I can't find it at all."
Mhm.
I said, "Awesome, good work." You did that. She's like, "Thank you so much." I was like, "I didn't do anything. You did the work
Mhm.
and you were ready for it." Like our bodies talk to us when we feel sensations and pains and things like that. It's not happening for no reason. Our bodies are always communicating with us, and it's our body's job to manage what's happening in our environment. So it's constantly managing emotions and food and things that we're witnessing and seeing and hearing. And so when we feel something, a lot of times we think that our bodies are attacking us or turning on us, and that's just not true. It's our body's way of communicating with us. And I love, one of my mentors says that the body is the subconscious. So we have things, emotions that get stored in the muscles and tissues and they get released, and it can manifest as pain or digestive issues or anxiety or sweating or whatever. And so when we're able to sit quietly and focus in on what we're feeling instead of getting tied away with an imaginary story that we have about what we're feeling, then we can hone in on what it is and allow that energy to move through us and eventually beyond us. Because energy doesn't stop, it always continues and it has to go somewhere. So energy can be released from the body in the form of sweating, crying, vomiting, bowel movements, fevers, things like that. So if we're able to quiet our mind and not get stuck in a negative feedback loop or a story that we have about what we're feeling, then it can just move out of us.
That is so beautifully said. You reminded me of a client I worked with back in 2005. This was one of my first clients using this technique. Um, my dad was briefly dating this woman, and she was taking pain meds every day. And my mom, who had recently passed away at the time of liver cancer, so my dad was worried that this woman was going to give herself liver cancer taking pain meds every day. And so he said, "Can
Oh
you work with
no.
her?" And she was totally willing to work with me. I'm like, "Okay, great." So we sit down, and she was a long distance runner, and she was taking these pain meds. At first, she said to me, because I asked her, "How long have you been taking them?" She goes, "I think about 4 or 5 years." I'm like, "Okay." So, I'm just asking her all kinds of questions, getting deeper and deeper. And the doctors think that it's because she's in her 50s and she's been a long distance runner her whole life. So, of course, you've worn your body out. And of course, you have pain because you're 50, right?
Mm-hmm. I know. I love those excuses that we give ourselves to not face our stuff.
Right? So, having had a background in massage, I said, "Do you mind if I touch your back?" And also worked as a physical therapist assistant, and massage in Canada is a little bit different. I had worked in oncology and palliative care and rehabilitation centers and, hospitals. And so it was more a medical focus, than like a spa focus that most people think massage is for. And
Mm-hmm.
so she lifted up the back of her shirt, and I put my hands on her quadratus lumborum, which are the square shaped muscles on the back, the lower back, right above the pelvis. And the side that was painful, I asked her which side. She said the right. And the side that was painful was cold, like no circulation, cold, ice
Wow.
cold, and hard as a rock, just hard. The whole muscle was holding on, and the other muscle was palpable and soft, and had some good tone, but it wasn't having any problems. And what's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting is, and it's something that I believe Bruce Lipton talks about, and also in the book Healing Back Pain by Sarno, he talks about it as well. This idea that when we push down and ignore exactly what you're talking about, when we push down these emotions, the unconscious mind will manifest them physically in the form of symptoms so that we start to listen. So for me, it was the
Yep.
heart palpitations, like my body's going, "Hey, we're going in the wrong direction here." For you, you had other symptoms, and for her, it manifests as back pain, but it really does. And for your yoga client, it was manifesting as breast pain. And so I sat her down and we did our breakthrough session together, where I started asking her question after question. And I eventually uncovered that she had been on this pain meds for 20 years. She
Wow.
had blocked in her mind that she was on these meds she really thought at the beginning, she really thought she'd only been on them for about 4 or 5 years. But as we went deeper and deeper, she's like, "Oh my gosh, it had been 20 years. And so it took us a few hours of digging. But what I uncovered was a story of when she chose to have an abortion. She had already had two sons. She was having an affair with a man who was married. She wasn't married, but he was, and he was a politician. So she was worried he would ruin his political career. And she's a Canadian, so some Canadian politician in Vancouver. His career would have been ruined should it have come out that she was pregnant with his child, and she was a Roman Catholic, so absolutely this could not happen, right? And
Mm-hmm.
she went in, she was telling me the story, and she said, as the nurse tried to give her pain meds for the abortion, she said, "No, I have to pay for this in pain." And I nearly fell off my chair. And this had
Wow.
been like 20 years ago, right? She had that she had done this. And I said, "Do you know what you just said?" And she says, "What?" I said, "You told yourself you had to pay for the guilt of this abortion that she still felt guilty about.
Mm-hmm.
You had to pay for it in pain. And she goes, "No, no, no. What I meant was in the moment. Like I had to feel the pain of the abortion to pay. That would have to be my penance." I'm like, "You are still feeling it right now." And
Mm-hmm.
throughout the time, I would ask her, on a scale 1 to 10, where's your pain? And when she would feel guilty during talking with me, her pain would be a 10 out of 10. And I'd asked her not to be on pain meds that day if she could handle it. And or I'm not a doctor, I can't tell people not to take medication, but I advised her that if she felt it in the moment, we could help to get to the root. So that's it. We figured out that guilt and this was the root moment. And so we resolved guilt, and her pain went to a zero. At the end of the session, I said, "Stand up, let me feel your back." And both sides were warm, and there was heat, and it was palpable. And I was just like, I was blown away. I mean, I had learned these things in theory, but to see it work, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just,
That's
this
amazing.
is how the body works, and exactly what you're talking about, and what you do with your clients. This is how our brain works. Our brain, our heart, our mind, and our body are interconnected, and a lot of physical symptoms will be, actually the root will be emotional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of it is, I find. And when we have things like autoimmune diseases and cancers, that's just our body trying to manage our life experiences. And many times we don't know what to do with these emotions, and we don't realize that we're carrying stuff from our early childhood because we think, well, I was just a kid, or we don't even remember a lot of it because we've stuffed it down somewhere. And so we don't realize that there's even anything there that needs to be managed. And then what can happen is in our lives, we have these situations because we tend to continue to attract or recreate the situations that happened to us as kids. And so it will just continue to reopen that wound. And we'll just have, like, if we have an abandonment wound as a kid, you'll continue to recreate these abandonment wounds, either with your boss or with your spouse or significant others or friends. And it'll just keep reopening that same wound and make it deeper and deeper and deeper
Mm.
until you pay attention to it and address it.
How did you, so you also do trauma coaching. Is that something you were certified in, or do you do it based on your own experiences? How do you do trauma coaching?
Based on my own experiences, I don't even know if that's like a legal thing.
It's
So,
okay. There's no like doctor, licensing body that's going to come after you for calling yourself a trauma coach, but you coach people through healing through trauma.
yeah, and I find in the work that I've done, pretty much anyone who's diagnosed with an autoimmune disease or cancer, and I'm sure there's exceptions, but the people that I have worked with all have some underlying trauma or traumatic experience or several traumatic experiences that contribute to their physical dis-ease.
Can you walk us through some steps, or can you elaborate on how we can heal trauma, or how you help people heal trauma?
I find initially, especially, it's very important to do it with someone else. Healing should have a witness. It's very, very difficult to heal in isolation. And in fact, I don't know of anybody who can heal in isolation because we're very social creatures and we need that human connection to be able to heal and to be validated too. We need to have somebody who can validate that what we're feeling is real and that what we're feeling is impacting us. And whether or not, like, the details of the story don't actually matter, even though our brains love to think that the details do matter, but the details don't. It's more about what we feel about the story. So you could have a story of like getting yelled at by a parent, and whatever happened, the details are kind of fuzzy or hazy, and those don't really matter anyway. It's more about what you felt as a result of being yelled at.
And that emotion that's in the present right now.
Yes, because that emotion, we carry it. If it's unresolved, then you continue to carry that. So if somebody gets mad at you or yells at you or whatever, then that reopens it and it
Mm-hmm.
triggers you more so than it would if you didn't have that wound. If we
Mm-hmm.
humans had no wounds at all, we wouldn't have any triggers.
Right.
There would be nothing to trigger us because we would just be like God, or angels or whatever. We wouldn't have any of those triggers.
Right. I love that you pointed that out, that, this kind of healing should be done with someone else. It's really when we are in our own head that we can just go into a very dark place or spiral, into, because it's like we're trying to solve a problem. I know Einstein said you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created it.
Hmm.
And so it really does take getting out of our own heads to get out
And
of our own
into our
way.
and into our bodies too.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because the body has the code. The body has that healing code that we need to access because the head is thinking. It's all a lot of times very logical. And I find that right brain meditations or right brain therapies are extremely helpful because trauma is stored in the right brain, and the right brain is like the creative, imaginative side of the brain. So if you can access the trauma that's stored there using guided imagery or transpersonal hypnotherapy or something like that, and it doesn't have to be, again, the details, but what the feeling is underneath the details, then you can heal whatever that wound is. And you'll still have the trigger, but it won't be debilitating and it won't be something that takes over your life anymore. It will be like, oh, wow, I have this awareness of this thing that I used to feel, and I don't have to get triggered over it anymore.
Brilliant. Something you shared on Facebook recently is one of the biggest things that you've changed that has helped your healing journey is to fo- to to shift the focus on that self-love and putting yourself first, and not putting yourself first in that you are neglecting your children or your husband or neglecting others. Why is it we always go there, like, oh, you can't put yourself first, because then all of a sudden that means we're neglecting others. But that putting the oxygen mask on yourself first means you have the oxygen to help others.
Yes.
It's funny because some other listeners posted after your comment saying that they really wanted to learn how to do that. How do we start the process of the self-love and putting ourselves first in order to help us heal?
As a mother, I find it extremely challenging because there's so much guilt and shame around self-care that our society does not allow for mothers or women in general to care for ourselves. We are supposed to have a full-time job, take care of kids full-time, take care of the house, manage all these things, grocery shop, cook, clean, all these things. So it doesn't really leave a lot of time for self-care. And I realized one time, I told my husband, I was like, I think I need like a night or two at the house just by myself. I've never, in the time that we've lived here, I had never done that before. I was never alone in the house overnight by myself. So he was going out to a concert and decided to take our kids to his parents' house, and they left, and I waved goodbye and I walked back inside and I looked at this empty house and I just started crying, like
Wow.
bawling, crying, and it wasn't because I missed them, but it was like I just felt so lost. Like I was in caregiver mode all the time, making sure everybody's needs are met, that now finally I had this space to be my own self. And I'm like, what do I do with this? Like, who am I? And I sat on the couch and I cried probably for about 30 minutes. And it felt really good. It was really cathartic. And then I just sat there and was like, what do I want to do? And I had no clue what I wanted to do, not a single inkling of an idea. So I just sat there and I didn't make any decisions because I didn't want to force myself into something. I was like, I'm just going to sit here until I have something that I decide I want to do. So then I decided that I wanted to go meditate. So I went and got my phone and set up this guided meditation little area out on our back porch in, the nice weather. The sun was shining and the breeze was blowing, and from there, I just continued to choose consciously the next inspired action, the next move that I wanted to make that was really focused on me. Because I find that it's important, we lose ourselves a lot, and especially in illness and especially with trauma, we don't know who we are. We don't feel safe in our bodies. So when we're able to ask ourselves what it is that we actually want, a lot of times we don't even know. That's why, sometimes when you're talking with your husband, it's like, where do you want to eat? Or what do you feel like eating tonight? Oh, I don't know. Whatever, anything you want, because we really don't know. And so I have found for me, having moments like that where I actually sit quietly with myself and look inside of what it is that I actually do want, or look for what I don't want. Because a lot of times, if you don't know what you do want, you'll know exactly what you don't want. So you can figure out, okay, no, I don't want those things. So let's narrow down what it is I do want. So the
It's
more
so
time
true.
yeah. So the more time I spend doing that, the more I'm able to get to know myself, and the more I can create my own personalized rituals for self-care and for putting myself first. And as a mother, I've noticed, like, if I start to get really triggered with my kids, it's never my kids that are at fault. Like, they're little
Mm-hmm.
kids. They don't know that they're not supposed to be asking me the same question 10 million times in a row. Like, they want an answer. So, yeah, it
Yeah.
makes perfect sense to them. So I find when I'm getting triggered with them, it's because I'm not carving out the space for me to get my own needs met. And it's not anyone else's job to meet my needs except myself. And that's a really hard concept for people, especially who are married, to grasp, because we believe and we've been conditioned to think that our significant others are supposed to make us happy. And nobody outside of us has that ability or that power. It has to come from within our own selves, which is great if people are willing to take that initiative and to look inside and get really introspective. But it's kind of a bummer if you're looking for a lot of external validation and external support and help. I remember I told my husband, I was like, I think we might be in a codependent relationship. And he was like, yeah, of course we are. I was like, oh, wait, you knew? And he's like, yeah. I said, oh, okay. I'm like, well, how do we get out of it?
That is
And it's
so
by
funny.
meeting your own needs. And I realized in my healing process too that I was putting so much responsibility of my own happiness on him or on my kids, and it's not their job.
Hmm.
And it's up to me to make sure that I am getting my needs met. And it might look different. Some days, like, I may not want to get out of bed until 9 or 10 o'clock, and that's okay. And if I'm able to get the support where I'm able to do that, then that's acceptable. The things
Mm-hmm.
that make it unacceptable is how we feel about the needs that we want to have met.
Oh, so if you feel guilty about sleeping in.
Yeah, and that I find that guilt or that shame is much worse for us than actually just doing what it is that we want to do, even if it's eating, candy or chocolate or whatever.
Mm.
And sometimes that's okay. If we're choosing consciously what we want without feeling guilty, then there's nothing to feel guilty about, because it's not a mindless action. It's like, oh, okay, I want chocolate right now because I just want it, and so I'm going to do it.
Chocolate isn't really that bad if you choose, healthy forms of it. I've got this like organic vegan dark chocolate with no sugar, sweetened with stevia. Definitely high in calories and fat, and okay, it's vegetable based fat, whatever. But if I ate, 3 bars of it a day, I definitely would gain weight. I can't have this as a meal. This is the healthiest junk food I can find. This is pretty awesome. And I eat it and I love it. And then I make sure, like you said, do that internal check and make sure you're not like carrying around feelings of guilt or shame after you treat yourself, because that is way more destructive than having that chocolate once in a while.
And it gets trapped.
Mhm.
So something that could be used for good then turns into a poison, and that doesn't help any of us.
Yeah, that guilt and shame we carry around when we start to do things that are treating ourselves, when we start to put ourselves first and then that guilt and shame comes up, the guilt and shame that we carry around is triggering our stress response. And
Hmm.
that is damaging to the body, shutting down the immune system, shutting down the body's ability to heal, and then that can create physical disease. So this is where it's like real, like the science is there that
Hmm.
we can long term, if we continue to hold on to guilt and shame every time we do something nice for ourselves, we can manifest disease.
And then we can develop even an almost like an allergic reaction to self-care.
Mm.
So there's like an energetic component too, that when we do something good for ourselves, our body rejects it.
That's
And
interesting.
I have a friend actually who was reaching out to me recently saying that whenever he starts to take new supplements, he reacts to it. And intuitively, I started asking questions and I was like, hey, I think you have an allergic reaction to self care. And he was like, holy, I have been working on that for so long in therapy. I said, oh, okay, well, it's manifesting. And
I've heard that when people get massages, I've heard people that go get a massage and then they feel really bad afterwards. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, let's go down the list. Do you drink enough water? Do you think your body was processing toxins? When was the last time you took care of yourself and you actually did something nice for yourself?
hmm.
Oh, okay. So this was like the first time in 20 years. Well, how did you feel when you're getting the massage? You feel guilty because you weren't with your kids? What's going on?
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah, and it's so common to feel that way.
so so walk us through it. Break us free from the chains of the stereotypical, mom, wife, putting everyone first and not and neglecting her own needs. Let's break free from that. That's an old behavior that no longer serves us. From now on, what are we committed to? What kinds of things can we do day to day? What kind of homework can you give us to begin to put ourselves first in a way that allows us to take care of ourselves so we can take care of those we love?
I should create like a protocol for this. This is a good idea. Awareness, of course, is super important. And I think curiosity is really important too. So, curiosity about our triggers. And that doesn't mean that you have to resolve the trigger right then, but when you're feeling triggered, having a childlike curiosity about it so that instead of allowing yourself to run off with this trigger, you're more able to kind of rein it in, like, okay, wow, this is really triggering to me. I'll deal with that later. What do I have to do now to get my needs met and whatever thing is in front of me need met? Um, and then I find too, for moms, especially stay-at-home moms, and actually even moms who work outside the home, taking breaks as often as necessary, because we are designed to live in a village. We're designed to live with a lot of support. And the way that we live is very isolated. We don't have a lot of help unless you have like a nanny or somebody coming in to help, which most people don't have that. So making sure that you're giving yourself breaks, even if it's a 5 minute break. A lot of times we don't really need as many breaks as we think we do. So even if it's that you're letting your kids play with a toy or something that they never get to play with, or even if you're letting them watch a TV show for 5 minutes or a YouTube song or something like that, just giving yourself 5 minutes every couple of hours to make sure that you're able to check in with yourself and ask yourself, is there something that I need right now? And I really like to do it before I have a complete meltdown, because after the fact, it's a lot harder to pick up the pieces than before the fact. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
prevention, the prevention is worth an ounce of cure in that situation. And then nobody gets hurt feelings because there's not a mom that's like angry and yelling at people.
Right?
um, and then in that time, making sure that you are not on your phone. We get so sucked into being on a screen when we're taking a break because we think, oh, I just want to zone out or I just want to decompress. But when we are plugging into the blue light and to the screen, it's actually worse for the brain
Mm-hmm.
than not doing that. So I suggest closing the phone, closing the computer, go outside if you can, read a book, journal, do anything that gets you out of your brain and into your body so that you are able to manage those triggers more easily. And then you're not beating yourself up because you've given yourself space to process anything that's come up in the last couple of hours and anything that may come up in the future.
I discovered that there are some grocery stores that have really cool kid centers where they'll watch your kids for 90 minutes.
Wow.
And also the YMCA. So the Y usually has free Wi-Fi, usually has a lobby or meeting rooms that are really comfortable. And so we'll take him to, like, there's like 3 or 4 grocery stores in our area that have this. He loves them all. And then usually they'll have like a seating area. And yeah, we've read books, we've talked, we've shopped, we've done work. We get to have a little bit of a break and decompress, and our son loves it too because he gets to go play with kids. And of course we do outdoors in the park and go for a walk, like, the regular stuff. But if you need like your kid to be like basically locked in a room with toys and supervision for free, amazing. It's been a lifesaver.
That's so awesome. And that's a good point too. I recently just started working out again, and we have 24-hour fitness near here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's such a great gym, and the kid care is so, so good. You have to clock in with a fingerprint, and they only allow one family in at a time in the room to check out and check in so that kids don't go home with somebody that's not their parent, which is great. And then I get my break and I actually have the energy to work out again, which is so awesome. And she gets to go play with little kids, and mommy gets to go do, my thing, which is awesome.
That's very cool. I really like that you brought up that we should take breaks, even just minimum 5 minutes, several times a day. But that when we're taking our breaks, and we can take longer breaks, but when we're taking our breaks, to not plug into a screen, that it really needs to be a time of self-reflection, to ask ourselves, what is it that I need? And it's okay that we don't know. I had a similar experience. I had kind of a panicky, like, I had some time alone, and I was all caught up in work, and I was all caught up in all my detox protocols. I'm like, I really don't know what to do with myself right now. I feel like I'm so used to being busy. I feel like there should be something on my to-do list, and I kind of felt lost. Like, who am I? What is life? What is the purpose
Yep.
of life? All these questions are coming up. Like, I have 5 minutes of nothing to do. I don't know how to handle this. So I totally know what you mean, that sometimes we just need to sit and do nothing and be with ourselves and reconnect and ground ourselves again, instead of avoid, because we're so good at avoiding and being stimulated externally, so that we don't start to listen to what's going on inside. So
Yep.
not using, when we take our breaks, not using things like sugar, alcohol. I mean, I can't believe how many women. So I'm in like there's this thing. It's like Tinder for moms, and
Hmm.
I'm swiping down, basically. It's swiping down for no, because every single one of them is like, let's go drinking, let's go crack open a bottle of wine, let's go. And I'm like, oh my god, how many
Oh
mothers
man.
are drinking, and I'm, again, no judgment zone, but why is it that it's culturally acceptable to down a bottle of wine a night, in
I
order to
know.
get to sleep or in order to cope? And I wish it was more culturally acceptable to, like, go get a massage and meditate and journal every night
I
to
know.
de-stress
I
and connect with
know.
yourself again, right?
I agree so much. And I feel like in some areas that is starting to shift. It's definitely not the mainstream yet, but I feel like it's that shift is starting to happen, and I'm starting to see it, and I'm getting more messages from people, like, how do I do this? And what kind of food should I be eating? And how do I not freak out at my kids?
And I like that you brought up that when your kid asks you something 5 times and then you explode at them, that it's not really your kid, it's you, and your threshold, your stress threshold is, your rain barrel's full. And if you do the things, the journaling, the meditation, the walks, the deep breathing, the yoga, all the self-care, then your kid could ask you the same question 20 times, and you're not gonna yell at them, you're not gonna snap at them. So it really is, it's a litmus test. If you're agitated around your children, that is the sign that your stress levels are too high. If you can
Hmm.
be around your kid and they're being their most annoying self and you're just bursting with joy and love for them, then you know you're doing something right when it comes to managing your stress.
Exactly. And our kids are so sensitive to what we feel. They're like little sponges. So even
Mm.
if we are not aware that we're stressed, they pick up on it and react as such, which is so interesting too, because I am often not aware of how I'm feeling. And then I'm like, why are my kids acting so crazy? And then immediately I'm triggered and I'm like, oh, I guess there was like some underlying upset going on in there that I didn't know was there.
Absolutely. So you've been painting this picture of your story, and here we are. Your whole family's recovered from black mold in the last 2 years, which has been quite the journey, right? It was 2 years ago that you had this event.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what happened? So since you have done this work where the black mold has allowed you to see that healing emotions is just as important as the food we put in us. Uh and in some cases more important because it is at the root of what's going on. So paint a picture of what's happened since then, since you've been working on healing yourself emotionally. What's been going on in your life and in your the life of your children. What's paint that sort of after picture.
So, pretty immediately after I started addressing the emotions, my kids' immune systems started to improve, which was a huge shocker for me because I didn't really realize how interconnected a mother and her children are until that. I've always known and believed, like, oh, well, yeah, mothers and kids are so interconnected and intertwined and we feel everything. But I had not actually witnessed it so clearly as I did then when their immune systems started to get better and they weren't
Mm-hmm.
getting sick as often
Mm-hmm.
or for as long. Um, of course, my energy levels improved. My digestion has improved. My stress levels have decreased dramatically. I used to not feel comfortable in my house alone at night. And now I don't have any issues with that at all. I'm like, I feel very safe. I feel safe in my own body. When I have emotions and things that come up to the surface, I feel much more at peace and able to handle it or able to just sit in it and allow it to pass. Um, my mentors recently said to me, "Oh, I guess you're feeling better because I haven't heard from you in a while." So that was a pretty good indication that things are moving in the right direction. I'm able to work out more, which is amazing for me because I wasn't working out for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
I am way more patient than I've ever been. I'm more organized than I've ever been. And organization is something that I've struggled with my whole life. And I'm finally starting to organize little areas of my life, like within work and within parenting and things like that. My relationship with my husband has improved dramatically, which is a huge bonus for both of us because I'm not nagging at him, expecting him to do things for me that he cannot do because he's not me.
Sorry, that's hilarious. That's exactly something I'd say. I totally get mad at my husband for doing things that I like want him to do but I need to do it. So I get
Yeah.
it. That's funny. That's funny. But yeah, owning your stuff, like really getting
Hmm.
like, because we so easily will point the finger, right? Well, we'll point the finger at our kids. They're the reason why I'm snapping, or point the finger at our husband. They're the reason why or what he did is the reason I am upset, right?
Yep.
And what really we have is we have unfulfilled expectations. These are expectations that we created, and like people are freaking we create expectations, and then when people don't fulfill them, like they're supposed to be psychic and they're supposed to know what our expectations are. right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
I expect I don't know, the groceries to get carried in or the whatever. Like we expect something and then they don't do it, we get upset. And it's like we're the ones. It's our fault. Like it's our fault that we are upset because we're the ones that created the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to be better at communicating, but also better at owning our own stuff, right? And going, wait a second,
Mm-hmm.
is it really everyone else that's ticking me off, or is it is it me? Is I'm the one that's choosing to be upset because I'm not taking care of myself. I'm blaming everyone else. I'm stressed out, and I'm not taking care of myself because when I do, I feel guilty about it. So I'd rather not take care of myself than blame everyone else for not for me not taking care of myself.
And not asking for help. That's another really, really big one that a lot of people struggle with, is that we don't want to ask for help because we don't want to burden anybody. We don't want to put anyone out. We don't feel like we deserve it. There's like a whole slew of reasons that we don't ask for help. And it's, I think, essential in this society. We have to have help. We can't do this on our own. We have to have somebody who can witness our healing, someone who can take care of our kids while someone else is witnessing our healing, somebody, who can give us recipes for cooking, somebody who can just be a shoulder to cry on. We need all kinds of support systems in place for us to be thriving members of society.
How?
Asking for help, I
Yeah,
think.
how? For someone who is so uncomfortable in asking for help, what are some ways that we can break through and begin to ask for help?
Starting small. So I guess asking for things that you believe you deserve.
Mm,
And then focusing on the things that we believe we deserve. Like if it's comfortable to ask for help, to ask somebody to hold the door open for you when you have your arms full of stuff, start there.
mm-hmm.
And that can be your entryway into asking for more help. Because if we don't ask for things, we won't get the things that we want because we're not asking for them. One thing I'm doing with my kids is, kids whine. They whine about everything because that's their first way of communicating. They whined and we would meet their needs because that's how it works. They don't know how to speak yet. So now when my daughter whines, I look at her and I'm like, I hear you whining and I see you look upset. Is there something I can help you with? And she'll nod and I'm like, okay, what is it? Because I don't know what you're thinking. I'm not a mind reader, and help me out, help me to help you. And sometimes she'll whine some more, and then eventually we'll narrow it down and she's able to ask, I need your help, or can you help me with this? And it starts little. We were taught to not ask for help. We're taught to not ask for things. We're taught to be in these codependent communication styles where we just whine, or we say, oh man, my pen doesn't work, hoping that somebody's going to rush in and bring you a new pen. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so when for me specifically, when I work to teach my kids to ask for what they need, it teaches me and reminds me that, oh yeah, I'm allowed to ask for what I need too. And other people are allowed to say no. Just because I'm asking for something doesn't mean they have an obligation to give it to me. But I do have a right to ask for what it is that I need or want.
It's beautiful. I love it. Start small. Start with what you're comfortable with. And if you aren't comfortable with asking for the someone to hold the door open, I mean, if you aren't comfortable with the small stuff, then there's something to uncover there, like about
Mm-hmm.
deserving it. I was for the longest time. I mean, my husband and I have been together 11 years, and I would complain that I'm the only one that cooks, and
Mm-hmm.
he'd smile and he'd be like, your food's so good. Why would I cook? Your food's so good. But recently, I said to him, I said, okay, I need you in the kitchen, and he'd be like, okay. And he'd get there and be like, what do you need? I'm like, hand him a knife, hand him a cutting board. Okay, you're gonna prep these veggies. And 2 hours later, we've made like a week's worth of food together, had a ton of fun. Our son watched us in the kitchen and helped as much as he could. I'd tell him to go get his chair so he can stand on it and watch and throw things in the food processor and that kind of thing. But it was a family event instead of me griping over food, which is not healthy. No, I
Mm-hmm.
love cooking, by the way. I love cooking, but I also, I was getting into the habit of eating out far too much because I want the break. I want, the service. Someone else to someone else to serve me the food. And
Yep.
every time we went out, my husband who's vegan would say, your food is so much better than anything we can get in any of these restaurants. And then we're walking away having paid $50 that we should not have spent. This food is not healthy. It's not organic. Like, he starts lecturing me on health. He's like, it's full of Roundup. Like, what are we doing? This is probably GMO. There's like a crappy oil in this food. And so why? And I'm like, well, it's because, no one cooks. And he does the dishes, thank God. I will not, this entire house would have, every dish would be dirty. I will not do the dishes. I cook, you have to clean. So I've actually like really enjoyed that my husband is so, wonderful in that way. Gets kind of old being the only one that cooks. So now he preps with me and he kind of follows right behind me cleaning and prepping. And he has so much fun doing it too. And then he gets to say what goes in the food too. So we end up like creating dishes together. And I couldn't believe it. I had him look through a recipe book and pick out some recipes. I don't follow recipes, but I follow like the general, here's an idea of recipes. I always like to like create my own, but he gave us some new ideas as what we could do. So it became fun, and I realized how much I had been blaming him and sort of nagging on him when it was really the power was I was giving away my power because
Mm-hmm.
it was 100. I was creating it. I was creating the nagging. And Landmark Education, they have a program called the Forum, and I've done all their classes, and they say that complaining is a form of domination. And it took me
Mm.
years to really get it. I was the one in control, even though I was acting like a victim. Victims, in this situation, right? I was not being victimized, but I was acting like a victim, and I was controlling the situation, dominating through complaining and through it's just interesting how when we start to own our own power and come back to our own power, we get our own voice back. And then we actually can improve the quality of our lives and our relationships because we realize that our complaining and our feelings of being a victim is we set that up, and we can create something different by making powerful requests of people for help.
Yep, exactly right. Yeah, it's huge to be able to see ourselves clearly in such a way that allows for those kinds of changes to be made and improvements to be made.
You brought up so many wonderful tips here today. I feel like we're just getting warmed up.
I know.
You had mentioned that you guide your clients through a process where they can begin to do some healing. You said it's not hypnotherapy, but you guide them through some imagery. Um, would you be comfortable with guiding us today through some self-awareness that allows us to start to become curious and see what it is that we need?
Let me see. It's very like intuitively led. So I would say first, if you're in a trigger and you have like this feeling of anger coming up, I ask my clients to feel that anger in your body or whatever the emotion is. So just to feel it in your body and notice where you're feeling it, notice the sensations that are coming up. And then to explore any other times in the past that you have felt that sensation physically or mentally before. And then depending on what comes up, just exploring and sitting with that. And then I will usually guide them, depending what comes up, I'll usually guide them to notice what they're noticing about this other situation. Usually it's from childhood. And then I encourage them to visit that younger version of themselves as adult them and to just tell them that they're safe. Tell this younger version of you that you are safe and that you didn't do anything wrong and that it's not your fault what happened to you. And then usually at that point, there is a really awesome feeling release. And sometimes for some clients, it takes a little bit of time to get there because that inner child part of them is not feeling ready to come out. They don't feel safe. So we have to find ways to tweak that to where they can feel safe to come out and show us what is going on.
So it's a beautiful process and it unfolds. But the awareness, like you said, is the first step. And that awareness, like I said, I was so afraid of becoming aware, thinking that there was a lot of dark stuff in me. And what I found is that it's beautiful, that every time something is presented to be released and to learn from, that it ultimately was a beautiful discovery and that it shifted into something beautiful. And so we have to be willing to take those steps to become aware, self-aware.
Exactly. Because without the awareness, we don't know what to change or what needs healing because we're still kind of in the dark.
Hmm. One of your certifications is NES bioenergetic scans.
Oh, yeah.
You haven't really talked about that yet, and I'm curious.
So I actually learned about Ness from your show, and I had to do some investigating. And so Ness Bioenergetic is amazing. It's a tool that interacts with the body field and can pick up distortions in the body field and lays it out in a format that's easy for us to understand. And within that, I love looking at the emotions that underlie the physical manifestations, of course. But with NES, it shows different shock traumas, and it can show you if you are in an active conflict state, if you're in a chronic conflict state, or if you're entering into a healing resolution of a conflict. And a conflict could be like a trauma, it could be a shock, it could just be something that is conflicting you at that time. It doesn't have to be something so intense, but just something that is impacting you energetically. And so using that has been a really profound tool in working with my clients because it does help access those deeper layers of things that a lot of times people don't know is there.
Can you share an example or a story of recent success with a client using that system?
I have a few. So there is a man that I was working with recently, and he came to me because he suffered a head injury. Something really heavy fell on his head. And so he came to me, and I looked at his scan and noticed that there was a lot of stuff coming up demonstrating that he was kind of in a chronic conflict state. And so, in using the scan, it gave me sort of an entry point into the underlying traumas. And I learned that this man dealt with a lot of abuse in early childhood and became a drug addict very early on with his father. And they didn't tell the mother. And then the mother found out that he was doing drugs, but not with his father, and sent him to rehab. So he had all these different traumas going on. And his father was very physical with him. And all of these things were manifesting in his current relationship where he was not ever physical, but he would get frustrated really easily or felt like his partner was very controlling or that she was very undermining or things like that. And so using Ness and that kind of guided imagery that I just talked about, we were able to come to resolution and help him to see that the current triggers in his life had actually nothing to do with what was really going on. So we were able to subconsciously link the present triggers to the past triggers. And he has told me that his relationship has changed like completely almost overnight. He is much more um aware of how he's feeling, and he doesn't put his feelings on his partner anymore. He's able to be more introspective when he's having a trigger. He can pause more. He's learning how to set healthy boundaries. We only had 2 sessions together, and he's like telling her different way, he's like setting these healthy boundaries with her and telling her, I'm not really comfortable talking about that with you, or can we talk about this later? Things like that, that he never would have felt comfortable saying before, but he would have felt comfortable telling her, you're so nosy, or you're such a nag, or, things like that. So he's just
Mm.
communicating in a much more healthy way
Wow. Yes, I
with
love
her.
it. Because when we're feeling defensive, we're typically will lash out, right? Because that's
Hmm.
something they did is uncomfortable, and then we'll lash out. And I get that we snap at people and we call them names and we become abusive ourselves when we are very insecure about letting them see something, or when we don't know how to healthfully, you know, protect our boundaries. So,
Hmm.
um, that is so interesting. Isn't it amazing when we look at how we interact and our emotions and our communication, our relationships? It's like really sticky and messy, but then when you start to unfold everything, it all makes sense.
I know it is. It's such a gift too. I feel like we have such like this innate gift within us that a lot of people don't even know is there. We don't realize that we have this ability to explore these things and uncover these things and then ultimately heal them. When I told this man, I said, this stuff that you're dealing with in your partnership has nothing to do with present time. And he was like, what? Like the thought of that blew his mind. He's like, there's no way, I'm upset with her. And I'm like, that's true. What you're feeling is true, but it has very little to do with her. It has everything to do with what happened to you as a kid.
Exactly. It's so funny. It's so funny.
I
So
know.
you have these wonderful systems that you help. So you help people to coach them emotionally, mentally, physically, energetically. You're helping people on all levels. Uh, is there anything else that you really wanted to make sure that you conveyed to the listener today?
Yeah, I believe that everybody is doing their best.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that looks like, it's going to be different for everybody. And to just remember that we all come from somewhere, like everybody has a story. We don't end up doing what we do, Ashley, out of, just pure passion. Like there's a reason we stepped into these lines of work, and we all have a story. We all come from somewhere. And if we're able to honor our own story, then we can see the stories that other people are living within as well. And we don't have to live from this place of anger or upset or dysfunction. It can be a lot more holistic and compassionate and understanding, and realizing that people are not actually out to get us. We're all just suffering here together, you know?
Right? Yeah, we
Like
are.
we're all in this together.
Exactly. Yeah, we're all going through our own stuff. You remember that like perfect girl in high school, those perfect girls and those perfect guys, and you'd look at them and you'd think like their lives are so great and everyone likes them, the popular people.
Yep.
And we always thought that they were somehow different than us. Like they didn't have insecurities, they didn't have drama, they didn't have like childhood abuse or anything. They were just perfect, and we're broken and we're flawed, and we're weird or whatever, but they're the there's nothing wrong with them. And it's just so funny as adults now to go, every single one of us, all the ones that we looked up to or thought are so perfect or so confident or so popular, they all were insecure, they all were vulnerable and worried and had their stuff and did not have it together. And we are all like that. We're all worried about what everyone else thinks. Like everyone else is this mob, this collective consciousness that that judges us, and we're the only
Yep.
ones that are somehow like bad and wrong. It's just really funny that we give away so much of our power like that. And when we
And
get that we're all human, that we're all going through this and we all have the same emotions, and we can start to be more gentle with ourselves.
and it's really kind of endearing that we think that we're the only ones that are going through something. That's like a little 2-year-old. That's our inner 2-year-old. That's like, but what about me? I'm hurting too.
Right?
And that 2-year-old probably needs a little hug and attention and maybe some journaling and meditation and some chocolate.
Yes. Let's all get the stevia infused chocolate. My
Yes.
favorite. That's so awesome. Well, Mandy, for listeners who are just in love with you, they can go to your website, mandywellness.com. And of course, they can join the Learn to Health Facebook group and see you there, because you're all over the Facebook group with us.
Yep.
And you have such a wonderful journey. You have an entire lifetime of experience that you bring to helping those heal you. And what I love about your healing practice is you're coming from your heart. You really are heart-centered when you work with your clients. So those who are inspired by Mandy should definitely go check out your website, mandywellness.com, and see about working with you. Is there anything on your website they should make sure that they look at, or is there anything like, should they follow you on social media, or where do you want people to make sure that they go to?
I'm a lot more active on my social media, on my Instagram and my Facebook page. I'm hoping to change and become more active on my website, but as of right now, my Facebook page, Mandy Wellness, and my Instagram handle is Mandy_Flanders.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure the links to everything you do, including your social media, is in the show notes of today's podcast at learntohealth.com. You got to go feed that cat.
I know, I'm sorry.
I'm like, oh, kitty, kitty, kitty. So fun. I'm such a cat person. That's so funny.
She's so needy.
Like all of us.
I know.
We like all have this inner cat that's just needy inside of us. I mean,
Yes.
talk about metaphors. Oh, Mandy, it's been so much fun having you here today. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. I'm sure we're going to have some great questions from the listeners in our Facebook group, and I'd love to have you back.
Thank you so much. I would love to come back. That would be such an honor. Thank you so much for having me. This was so awesome.
Are you looking to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com, and one of our fantastic true health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program.